Michael wanted to do this sitting down, but it's the old demagogue in me. I need the pulpit, I need the podium, and if I can't be erect, at least I can be upright. By the way, do you know why the Amish girl was excommunicated? 2 Mennonite. Look, I'm going to take the doctor's excellent points in order, if I may, and you will, I'm sure, have minds orderly enough to recall the order in which he made them. On the empirical evidence, so-called, adduced, that a religious faith can lead to greater health and well-being, I, in a sense, do not doubt it. In other words, I can easily imagine that those who think they are the special object of a divine design feel better for thinking so. I just think it's going to be very important for anyone claiming this to see the dismaying trapdoor that is right under their feet. If you're going to claim this for one, how are you not going to claim it for all? Do we not hear incessantly that the Hamas organization in Gaza is a provider of welfare to the poorest of the poor? Have we not heard this? Do we not hear that Louis Farrakhan's crackpot racist organization, the Nation of Islam, gets young people off drugs? For all I know, it's true. It not only says nothing about the truth or validity of their theology, but it must say a certain amount, at least, about our willingness to think wishfully or cultishly, which was, if you like, part of my point to begin with. As to the center versus the fringe, I get this all the time. Don't judge religion by its fundamentalists and its extremists. No, why should I? I don't have to. I judge it by its foundational texts, and I judge it by the statements of its authorities. Take a case from the Quran, just for once. Does it, actually it's not the Quran, excuse me, take a case from the Muslim foundational documents, the Hadith, which have equal canonical authority. They say, if someone becomes an apostate, leaves or changes their religion, they must be killed. The sentence is death. Don't anyone be telling me that's a metaphor. No, it's just intended as a sort of general admonition. No, it means what it says, and it's been applied to a couple of people who now have to live, friends of mine, as a matter of fact, as political refugees in Washington, D.C., who know how true the impact of that hadith. There's no wiggle room there, so the question for a Muslim must be asked. Do you think this is the word of God, or don't you? Because if you don't, you're saying that God shouldn't be able to tell you to do an evil thing, and if you do, you're saying he should. In either case, faith falls as a reinforcement of ordinary morality. Recently, Dr. McGrath is a member of the Church of England, the Anglican Communion, the Episcopalian Communion, what George Herbert, my favorite religious poet after John Donne, the sweet mediocrity of our native church was how he referred to the See of Canterbury. Everyone thinks it's the mildest of all. It not only calls itself a flock, it looks very sheep-like. However, the Bishop of Carlisle recently, tipped, I'm told, to be the next Archbishop of Canterbury, said that the floods in northern Yorkshire that devastated a large part of England in the summer and killed and dispossessed a large number of people were punishment for homosexuality. Now, to connect meteorology to morality seems to me, I have to say, flat out idiotic, whichever way you do it. If there was a connection between meteorology and morality, which religion has very often argued that there is, I don't see why the floods hit northern Yorkshire. I can think of some parts of London where they would have done a lot more good. Just as the hurricane that devastated New Orleans, we found punishment for sin, as it must have been, left the French Quarter alone. You have to make up your mind on this. You either think God intervenes or he doesn't. I'm clear. I say, I don't think so. Will Dr. McGrath say that he does intervene and that we can tell when he does, or will he not say so? You have to ask him. You have to hear his answer. Does he say sometimes intervenes? Or does he say he moves in mysterious ways? My position is clear. His remains, I think, distinctly opaque. It was the Archbishop of Canterbury, Geoffrey Fisher, who said the following, that a nuclear war, thermonuclear war, would only hasten our transition into a more blessed state into which we would bound to eventuate anyway. If I had told you that remark and asked you to guess, you would have said Mahmoud Ahmadinejad said it, or some other fanatical, verminous mullah. No, the Archbishop of Canterbury said it, and why shouldn't he? Because another immoral and sinister thing about religion is that lurking under it at all times, in every one of its versions, is a desire for this life to come to an end, for this poor world to be over. the yearning, the secret death wish that's in all of it, let this be gone, let us move to the next stage, is present at all times, unless it's repudiated, which I invite Dr. McGrath to do. But if he does so, I don't see in what eschatological sense he can claim to remain a Christian. And he can't take it a la carte. If you claim or accept the one version, you have to accept the other. If it's true in general that religion does one thing and some people do good from it, then you have to accept all the wicked acts that are attributable to it as well. And I think you'll find that those don't quite equalize at the margin, depressing though that conclusion would be. I have a challenge, which I have now put in print on the Christianity Today website, in Holy Blossom Synagogue in Toronto the night before last, in many other places, and on the air and on the web, and it's this. If it's to be argued that our morality, our ethics can be derived from the supernatural, then name me an action, a moral action, taken by a believer, or a moral statement uttered by one, that could not have been made or uttered by an infidel, an unbeliever. I have tried this everywhere. On a large number of people, I've not yet had even one reply. But if I was to ask you, can you think of a wicked action that could only have been performed by someone who believed they were on an errand from God, there isn't one of you who would take 10 seconds to think of an example. And what does that tell us? I would say it tells us a lot. And here's the bogus answer to it, that was only very gently mentioned by Dr. McGrath this evening. Well, what about atheist nihilism? What about atheist cruelty? What about 20th century totalitarianism? I take this seriously enough to have put a chapter in my book about it, available, by the way, at fine bookstores everywhere. And I can only summarize it now, and I'll do so as tersely as I can. First, fascism, the original 20th century totalitarian movement, is really, historically, another name for the political activity of the Catholic right wing. There is no other name for it. Francoism, Salazarism, what happened in Croatia, in Austria, in Bavaria, and so on. The church keeps on trying to apologize for it, can't apologize for it enough. It's the Catholic right, Mussolini. You can't quite say that about Hitler, National Socialism, because that's also based on Nordic and pagan blood myths, leader worship, and so on, though Hitler never repudiated his membership of the church. And prayers were said for him on his birthday every year till the very end, on the orders of the Vatican. And all of these facts are well known, and the church still hasn't found another way to apologize for that enough. And whatever it is, you can call that, you can't call it secular. You may not call it secular. By the way, Joseph Goebbels was excommunicated from the Catholic Church. 50%, according to Paul Johnson, the Catholic historian of the Waffen-SS, were confessing Catholics. None of them was ever threatened with excommunication, even threatened with it for taking part in the final solution. But Joseph Goebbels was excommunicated for marrying a Protestant. You see, we do have our standards. Now, okay, moving to Marxism, moving to Leninism. Okay, in Russia in 1917, for hundreds of years, millions of people have been told the head of the state is a supernatural power. The Tsar is not just the head of the government, not just a king, but he stands between heaven and earth. And this has been inculcated in generations of Russians for hundreds of years. If you're Joseph Stalin, himself a seminarian from Georgia, you shouldn't be in the totalitarianism business if you can't exploit a ready-made reservoir of credulity and servility that's as big as that. It's just waiting for you to capitalize on. So what do? Well, we'll have an inquisition for one thing. We'll have miracles for another. Lysenko's biology will produce 4 harvests a year. We'll have heresy hunts. We'll tell everyone they must be grateful only to the leader for what they get, and they must thank him and praise him all the time. And that they must be aware all the time of the existence of the counter-revolutionary devil who waits to... You see where I'm going with this? That's not secularism. Michael? Oh, do I need really 2? Okay. I'll tell you my North Korea stories another time. It's surrogate, it is at the very best and the very worst. The examples I've been talking about are a surrogate for messianism, for the belief in ultimate history and the end of days and the conclusion of all things, which is, I've tried to argue, I hope with some success, the problem to begin with, the replacement of reason by faith. The discarding of the one thing that makes us important and useful and different from other primates in favor of something that requires no evidence and just requires incantation. Not good for you. If Dr. McGrath or anyone else could come up with an example of a society which had fallen into slavery and bankruptcy and beggary and terror and misery because it had adopted the teachings and the precepts of Spinoza and Einstein and Pierre Bayle and Thomas Jefferson and Thomas Paine, then I'd be impressed, and that would be a fair test on a level playing field. But you will find no such example. Indeed, the nearest such example we do have is these great United States, the first country in the world to have a constitution that forbids the mention of religion in the public square, except by way of limiting it and saying that the state can take no interest in establishment of faith. Best known under the rubric of the wall of separation, my new slogan is, Mr. Jefferson, build up that wall. Hope you'll join me in it. Very quickly in my last minute. Yes, Dr. McGrath, you're right. There is something about us as a species that is problematic. It isn't just explained by religion. There's something about us that tempts us to do wrong. It's pretty easily explained, I think. We are primates. High primates, but primates. We're half a chromosome away from chimpanzees, and it shows. It especially shows in the number of religions we invent to console ourselves or to give us things to quarrel with other primates about. If anything demonstrates that God is man-made, not man God-made, surely it is the religions erected by this quasi-chimpanzee species and the harm that they're willing to inflict on that basis. I think on the point of Christology that you closed with, I ought not to take any more of the audience's time, but be prepared to discuss, and I hope I've yielded back some of my time to questions, and I'm grateful again for your indulgence. Thank you.
I think the resurrection is a historical event. Something that happened in history was seen